The OECD predicts that Canada will be the worst performing advanced economy over the next decade, and also the 3 decades after that. Canada's economy is facing an emergency, and this comes straight from the Bank of Canada's Senior Deputy Governor Caroline Rogers, who talks about Canada's long-standing poor productivity. Although productivity might sound like an abstract concept, it affects each and every one of us in a real way. It affects your wallet, your standard of living, and your financial security, as we'll break down in this video. In simple terms, productivity measures the ratio of output versus input. If you're baking muffins and you can make 12 muffins in 1 hour, then your productivity is 12 muffins per hour. On a national level, productivity measures the output of an economy, which are all the goods and services produced, cars, clothes, and haircuts, against inputs, which are capital and labor. And we can further differentiate productivity into capital productivity and labor productivity, but in either case, higher productivity means that an economy is using its inputs more efficiently. The productivity of a nation directly influences things like economic growth, inflation rates, and job opportunities. Now, the emergency here is that Canada's productivity has been very poor and also very low compared to other advanced nations. In 2022, Canada had the second lowest productivity levels in the G7, only above Japan, and productivity has been declining for over more than a decade. Back in 1984, the Canadian economy was producing 88% of the value generated by the US economy per hour. But by 2022, Canadian productivity had fallen to just 71% of that of the United States, which means that Canadian productivity has not only fallen far behind that of the US, but the gap between the two countries has also widened. In 2019, Canadians on average only produced 57 US dollars per hour, while US workers produced 74 US dollars per hour, which means that US workers are 30% more productive. Even Australia and most Western European countries produced more on an hourly basis. And as we talked about earlier, the nation's productivity is one of the central things that affects your financial future. In Caroline Rogers' words, an economy with strong productivity can have faster growth, more jobs, and higher wages with less risk of inflation. Think of it this way: when a nation produces more goods and services with the same amount of resources, there is more supply, potentially leading to lower prices for everyday essentials. This means your money goes further, allowing you to save more and afford better quality goods. Higher productivity potentially also leads to higher incomes, as it enables employers to raise wages for their employees. On the flip side, lower productivity leads to higher prices and stagnant wages, making it harder to maintain your standard of living and achieve your financial goals. And talking about financial goals, one way that you can bolster yourself against the nation's declining productivity and its negative impacts is to start investing. If you haven't started investing yet, or you're not so happy with the investment platform that you're using right now, try using Wealthsimple. I've stuck with Wealthsimple for the past few years because they have no commission fees for trading stocks and ETFs, and their investment app is just so simple and easy to use, especially for beginners. So in case you want to try it, you can use my referral link in the descriptions down below, and once your account is funded, Wealthsimple will give you a bonus of $25. Now, Canada's low productivity might prompt you to say, but Canadians work just as hard and they're just as smart. And you're probably right. Low productivity doesn't happen because workers are not talented or sluggish. Does it perhaps have anything to do with the amount of hours Canadians work, for example, compared to our neighbors in the US? Americans do work longer, 3.5% more hours than Canadians. But this doesn't really explain the high productivity, especially if we measure productivity as output per hour. There are several factors affecting productivity, and these factors are so intricately intertwined that it's really difficult to isolate them. The first one is capital intensity, which is the amount of money spent on tools and equipment that workers use. If we take the muffin example from earlier, if I gave you an oven that could hold multiple trays instead of just one, then perhaps your productivity would increase from baking just 12 muffins per hour to now 48, let's say. If a garment factory uses more efficient sewing machines, then it can produce more pieces of clothing per hour of labor. The more capital that is invested into a business, also known as business investment, the more productive the workers are likely going to be. And this is a problem in Canada. Business investment per worker is lagging far behind that of the US in more than a decade. In 2021, business investment per worker in Canada was only $14,700 compared to $26,800 in the US, which is 82% more. While the US has increased its business investment over the last decade, Canada's has declined. Now, despite all good efforts, how are you supposed to increase productivity when the investment in capital is going down? The second closely related reason for Canada's declining productivity is innovation, or a lack of innovation. Innovation can increase productivity significantly. If you create new products and methods that increase efficiency, for example by using robotics, you can increase productivity, reduce cost, and increase quality. And if we look at investment in artificial intelligence, although Canada ranks 2 among G7 countries in terms of AI investment, it's last in terms of actual AI adoption. How about research and development? Canada has an R&D intensity ratio of 1.8, which is basically below the OECD's average of 2.7. Canada also ranks low compared to other G7 countries. It's the only G7 country that produces less innovation output relative to its level of investment, meaning that although Canada does invest into innovation, it is just not producing results proportionate to that input. The next thing that influences productivity is human capital. If, for example, factory workers get trained to use new digital tools for inventory management and production planning, then they can improve overall efficiency. And again, here Canada lags behind its peers. While Canadian employers spend only $240 per employee on training annually, our OECD peers invested $750 per employee. Connected to this is also the problem of brain drain, where talented and highly skilled people leave one country for another one, among others because better job opportunities and higher pay. In our case, Canadians moving to the US. 126,000 people left Canada for the US in 2022, a 70% increase over a decade ago. What's the use of having talented people and also skilled immigrants coming in only for them to leave again? And usually they leave for very legit reasons, because with their knowledge and skill level, they can earn more money and oftentimes even have lower cost of living just south of the border. And then there are 2 more factors influencing productivity which are a bit harder to measure. One is limited competition. In a country like Canada, where you have limited competition in many industries, for example in the grocery sector, companies may become complacent. They don't innovate and are not as pressured to increase efficiency. And in the worst case, they create barriers for other competitors to enter so that there is overall less innovation. Another highly debated topic is risk aversion, which is a business's tendency to avoid risk. But taking risk, calculated risk, is essential for a business to grow. While some say that no, Canadian businesses are not more risk averse, a study by Deloitte says that yes, Canadian businesses are more risk averse. They are lacking courage and need to have more courage so that they can grow. The OECD predicts that Canada will be the worst performing advanced economy over the next decade, and also the 3 decades after that. It also predicts Canada can at best achieve real per capita GDP growth of only 0.7% per annum until 2030. This places us dead last among advanced countries. And this is bad because it will affect Canadian living standards. In 1981, Canadians enjoyed a $3,000 higher per capita standard of living than the major Western economies. 40 years later, coinciding with the drop in productivity we talked about, Canada was $5,000 below that same average. And if the trajectory continues, the gap will be nearly $18,000 by 2060. In the past, Canadians could expect their incomes to rise steadily throughout their working lives, thanks to positive economic trends. But now, things have changed. Canadian living standards and quality of life relative to other countries is expected to decline as other nations become more productive and leave Canada in the dust. So what to do about this? There obviously needs to be more investment into capital. Everything from machinery, equipment, but especially intellectual property, which gives businesses access to production processes that are more efficient. More investment in training is needed for existing workers so that they can become more efficient. And the colleges and universities need to do a better job and equip students entering the workforce with real skills instead of lectures on you fill in the gaps so they can be more productive from the start. The government also needs to promote entrepreneurship much more to increase overall productivity, as Canada has fewer entrepreneurs today than ever. But while waiting for the government to never do the things that they should have done a long time ago, there are a few things that we can do ourselves, like upskilling or taking training into your own hands. That way you can produce more value for the economy while getting yourself a higher paying job. Or become an entrepreneur yourself by starting a side gig, for example, a small design business, and make more money. To put things into perspective, remember that all in all, Canada is still a very advanced economy, but it has a lot of homework to do if it wants to maintain or even improve that position. If you enjoyed this video and are curious to know how much Canadians make, then you might want to watch this one next.